because we are breaking down USC and UCLA, one of the biggest games on the Week 12 schedule. And before we get in to the particulars of this matchup, and before we get to, yes, giving you our pick for the game, I want to look at sort of the broader picture here, because the Pac-12 has been looking to fight for football relevancy and compete for a national championship. And that starts with getting more teams in the playoff. There is one Pac-12 team remaining with just one loss, and that is the USC Trojans. Josh, do you think that the Pac-12, which just had a pretty solid upper tier throughout this season, do you think the Pac-12 has done enough to be able to give USC a shot should they be 12-1 at the end of the season?
To me, they have. As you famously know, they hadn't put me on the committee yet, but like in my mind's eye, they have. There's been a lot of disparaging remarks, quite frankly, about the Pac-12 and the Big 12 as of late. And I know where they come from, but that doesn't mean I have to endorse them. I think if you don't have a team like Georgia or like Ohio State that's just perma-locked inside the top three, people say you're a weak conference in lieu of all the contrary evidence. And so I've watched the Pac-12 this year, and I've thought it's the best product that the conference has put out in years. I've thought the Big 12, for that matter, has been very competitive, very balanced this year. It's absolutely what everyone claims they want in college football fandom until you get it, and then you poo-poo all over it. So I think that, yes, to me they have, but I also think that whether anyone wants to admit it or not, that blowout loss by Oregon, or to Oregon in Week 1, that matters. And therefore USC is probably carrying the water a lot like the folks out here probably would have wanted it to play out. I just wonder, USC wins, and what else is in that blank? Like, what else has to happen for the ticket to get punched out there? I think even though we've got like 2 or 3 weeks left, we still have so many scenarios we could go through.
Yeah, I think if you kind of pick apart USC's resume right now, you can say that there's not really a standout kind of resume win, one you can point to say this is the one that's going to get them in the playoff. But if they beat UCLA this weekend, they get Notre Dame next week, and the Irish have looked much better in recent weeks than they did earlier in the season. If the Trojans can get through those 2 games and then get to a Pac-12 championship, whether it's a rematch with UCLA, Utah, or maybe a game against Oregon, if they win out, I think it's going to be pretty hard to leave a one-loss Pac-12 champion USC out of the college football playoff. Now, I think we know how brands have impacted playoff decisions before. If it was a UCLA or an Oregon or a Utah, maybe the committee could talk itself into that team not being good enough. But if it's a one-loss USC, I think all the cachet, Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams, and a possible Heisman campaign, that would definitely get them in.
I mean, you just said it right there, and Boo Corrigan said it on the record when they were asking USC to UCLA. They were saying, okay, so what's the difference between these two teams? And one of the first names and one of the first points that was mentioned by the selection committee chair was, well, Caleb Williams and all these touchdown passes, star power for USC is something that is impacting the minds of the committees. I mean, these are human beings on the committee, and they are wowed by Caleb Williams. On that note, we've got a great quarterback battle here, because while Caleb Williams has been outstanding running Lincoln Riley's offense there for the Trojans, we also have Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the grizzled vet, who's having a great season and really making UCLA fans glad that he did decide to come back for another year of eligibility. Tom, when you look at this quarterback battle, they're not the same quarterback, but how do these two stack up against each other?
Oh, you're right. They're not the same, but they are both very fun and very exciting to watch, because when the both of them are on their game, they're just big play after big play after big play. And when you look at Caleb Williams in the USC offense, I think if you want to do the surrounding cast, it's easy to argue that Williams has the more enticing surrounding cast, whether it's at receiver or was at running back before Travis Dye got hurt last week. But I think that is an offense designed for explosive plays. We've seen Lincoln Riley do it at Oklahoma. He's brought the same system to USC. They are able to put together big, explosive, fast-scoring drives. They put up points in a hurry. But UCLA, while they don't really get the same kind of attention for it, it's not like Chip Kelly got to where he is as a college football coach because he was a defensive-minded coach. He was one of the innovators in the spread that helped spread it around college football and make it what it is. And Lincoln Riley cribbed a lot of what he's done in his offense off what Chip Kelly used to do at Oregon. So these are two very good offenses. Dorian Thompson-Robinson does not get the same kind of credit that Caleb Williams does because he is not the name, but he's having the best year of his career there, and he's been at UCLA for what feels like going on a decade at this point. So that's saying quite a bit, and I think this is going to be an excellent matchup. And honestly, both of them should probably deserve Heisman votes at the end of the year. I don't think both of them will get them, but I think they both deserve them.
Tom, here's the other thing, to go back to what you just pointed out. Although it's a quarterback conversation we're having right now, you cannot have the conversation about Caleb Williams without inserting the loss of Travis Dye. And that didn't impact them against Colorado for obvious reasons. But he was on his way to being about a 1,000 or 1,100-yard guy again this year. The next closest option has carried it a total of 52 times this year. And so if I'm UCLA, and by the way, they are already top 10 in the country in preventing 20-plus yard plays, those explosive plays. They're very good defensively. The Oregon game kind of threw that out of whack in people's minds because that's the only UCLA game some people have watched this year. But outside of that game, they've done an excellent job of limiting explosives and at least making you work the ball down the field to score on them. If you don't have that weapon at tailback, and all of a sudden you can afford to loosen that box up a little bit, I wonder if we don't see something along the lines of what we saw when Southern Cal went to Oregon State. Because in our mind, we think about Caleb Williams and we think about that offense humming. But there was a time this year where they went on the road and that explosive play rate ground to a halt, and they almost lost in Corvallis. And they struggled to score double digits until the very end of the game in Corvallis. And so if UCLA is going to win this thing tomorrow, that will be one of the key ingredients. You turn on the game mid-third quarter and all of a sudden USC's offense looks bogged down. It's probably because they're not hitting explosives, and it's probably because there is too much emphasis and focus placed on Caleb Williams because they can't run the ball effectively.
Now, when Circa opened up this line, they set it for the total at 82. And it makes us, I think we all share this, we love college football because the same board had a total of 32. So, I mean, those numbers have shifted since, but 50 points between the kind of games that we're going to have here. The total is currently resting at 76.5. And we will get picks in a little bit, but instead I wanted to turn to the defensive side. Josh, you just mentioned that this UCLA defense, does impress you. The USC defense, Josh, is it as bad as the numbers suggest in your eyes?
Someone told me once upon a time stats never lie and numbers never lie, and I personally don't believe that. But since it's convenient to my argument right now, yes, numbers never lie to you, Chip. There is not a stat you just read that misleads us in any way. Look, if this UCLA offense gets humming, short of forcing turnovers to negate some of the yardage put up, no. USC probably will not have a whole lot of luck slowing them down. At the same time, what I think about is the modus operandi for USC in those moments has normally been we're able to trade points. Now, you run the risk of a Utah repeat happening, although you don't necessarily have to play in as hostile a road environment here as you did there. But what if you can't trade points? Like, that's what I keep coming back to. What if we're looking at the USC defense and saying, guys, come on, you got to get a stop here? Because the reality is they may look back at you and throw their hands up, shruggy emoji style, and say, no, I don't know what you want from us. We can't get a stop. That's not how we win.
Yeah, when you look at this game, odds are there's not going to be a whole lot of defensive stops going on in this one, as that total suggests. But if it comes to comparing the two defenses, as Josh touched on earlier, this UCLA defense at least does a good job of keeping the ball in front of them and limiting explosive plays. And to this point, they've done it against a more difficult schedule than the one USC has faced. And when I look at the Trojans' defense, it's very much we either force a turnover or we give up points. There's been no in between, and that is not something that is easy to rely on week to week, especially when you start playing better teams like the UCLA team that the Trojans are going to see this weekend. So I don't think either one of these defenses is anything special that you're going to write home about. It's certainly nothing like we saw from Georgia last year. I do think if I have to give one of these two teams the edge on that side of the ball, it's UCLA because I've seen them stop good offenses. I haven't seen USC do it yet.
All right, now let's turn our attention to the game. Let's turn our attention to our best bets for the game. Josh, you're there on scene. What do you think is going to be the play? How do you see this one playing out?
I have no interest in that total whatsoever, but I do think that this game was probably going to open close to a pick'em already. And I think the results from last week, respectively, probably gave me about a point or a point and a half added value on a number that I was already going to jump on. I think UCLA is the more well-rounded team. I think they are the better team. And let me tell you this, my own power ratings disagree with that. But look, computers cannot be allowed to run the world. And so occasionally, like I've done with my model in Texas, you just have to take the computer and you got to throw it in the trash. And you got to understand, hey, both of these teams, 1 and 2 in the Pac-12 in explosive play rate offensively, but only one of them is up there in preventing it defensively. And I think in lieu of being able to forecast turnovers, that's what this comes down to. And might we also give a little credit to the Rose Bowl being sold out tomorrow? 16,000 plus in the student section. That's enough to sell out some arenas. So a lively environment. You can't let them down if you're Chip Kelly and the Bruins. You tripped up last week against Arizona, in my opinion, and this is some data terminology here, minor setback for a major comeback. Bruins went outright.
We shouldn't let computers run the world, but we should believe in the science. And as I consult Bill Walton's laws of Pac-12 football, the first law is that whatever happens in the Pac-12, it must be to the absolute detriment of the Pac-12. So when I look at this matchup, Pac-12 has only got one college football playoff contender remaining. That's USC. That means USC has to lose. Give me UCLA plus 2.5. I'm taking the points, but I'm with Josh. I think they're the better team. I think they've played a much more difficult schedule, and I think they've performed to the same level as the Trojans. This is going to be the first time USC's really been tested all season long. I like the Bruins here. Give me the points to be safe, but I don't hate the money line at all.
So many letters in this alphabet soup. We've got a USC. We've got a UCLA. How about a UNITY? UNITY. UNITY. Drop that confetti because I am right there as well with you. I like the Bruins. I think the Bruins win the game. I think that the injury to Travis Dye, as Josh mentioned earlier, super significant because when the passing attack was starting to stall, when they just needed to burn a little bit of clock to help their defense, when they needed to keep drives alive, Travis Dye was there for that. And I think that Caleb Williams is going to have to take on a bigger part of the run game, which could leave him a little bit more banged up. But a lot of this is about, this is an older UCLA team that has kind of been building together. Some of them have transferred in, but been in the program a couple times. And the physicality that the Bruins have shown this year is me getting to eat my words, pun intended, for making fun of the $1 million meal table for, 2 summers ago. Chip Kelly's getting grilled because he goes into UCLA football and says, we need better nutrition. We need to build a stronger team. And it seems to be paying off, and I think it pays off on Saturday with a UCLA win. So we are all on the Bruins. Our thank you to Josh Pate. You can follow all of his action in and around USC and UCLA. And, of course, listen to and watch The Late Kick with Josh Pate Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.